It was going to be the wedding of a lifetime, though nobody knew what that meant, other than that it seemed everyone in town received the gold-leafed invitations. Red and yellow, black and white, it didn't matter. Jew, Samaritan, Gentile, even Raiders fans. And not just every household, but every single person in every house or on the streets. Everyone received a personalized invitation, whether or not they had an address. Yet not one single person knew who was getting married. The first people to arrive that afternoon weren't sure what to do. Some brought gifts and weren't sure where to put them. Once someone left theirs next to the intertwined dolphin's ice sculpture, that became the official repository. Coat check staff soon had their hands full with new arrivals, each excited to see the festive hall adorned for a royal wedding. People naturally gravitated towards others they knew, but there were so many new faces, many more than expected in a town where everyone thought they knew everybody else. The initial awkwardness soon dissipated once the wine started to flow. Chatting, laughter, and all sorts of good fun as old friends mixed with new. But just as people were really loosening up, something happened. The servers stopped serving wine. They were apologetic, not sure what happened, assuming that someone must have gone out back to retrieve some more cases, but none came. Surely it was a mistake, but apparently they ran out. While initially patient as they waited, guests soon started expressing disbelief that the host would invite so many people in such mysterious and intriguing fashion, yet fall so short on the wine order as to be insulting to the guests. The wine really is gone. What a disaster! Who has a party like this, invites everyone in town, and then doesn't plan for enough wine to go around? And then the murmuring starts. But not just about the wine. You see, as long as everything was going well, Sybil Baker didn't care about how short Amy Rich's skirt was. But now it was becoming a problem. Amy had all the modesty of a prostitute, and Sybil had just enough to drink that telling her about it seemed like a good idea. And the way Melvin was pacing angrily in front of the bar, you see, that is why you don't invite Gentiles to this type of thing. They make the whole thing awkward. Anita was watching all of this unfold, and then started to tap her toe impatiently. She was about 30 seconds from grabbing her husband, Marlowe, along with her coat, and blowing out of this event. And when she went, at least 5 other couples would follow close behind. She was that kind of woman. Mary, watching all of this unfold, realized that something needed to be done, so she went looking for her son and his buddies, who came with her earlier in that day. She couldn't see them anywhere inside the hall, so she took a few of the waitstaff with her outside to see where Jesus and the others were hiding. Sure enough, there they were, right outside the door. There was a group of them playing hacky sack, kicking the little bean bag into the air, laughing, and getting all of their formal tunics dusty. Whereas things were getting so intense on the other side of the door, there they were having a grand time, involving bystanders who had no clue how to play into their game. Mary was perturbed. I mean, she loved the light in her son, his zest for life, even though he was still playing hacky at age 30. But come on! Things are collapsing inside, and he's out here having fun, like nothing is wrong. She marched right into the center of their hacky circle and snatched the sack out of the air, to the groans of everyone. Woman, what are you doing? Asked Jesus, amused by her seriousness. Jesus, all hell is breaking loose in there because they ran out of wine, and you're out here goofing around like nothing is the matter. Jesus smiled. But why does all of that involve me? It is not yet my time. He clearly was not bothered the way in which she wanted him to be bothered about this. Truth be told, however, Mary had no clue what she expected her son to do to make things better. Technically, he had never actually performed any miracles up to that point. She only knew that he knew how to make things work in this life. that his light seemed to make every situation better, as if God's own light shined through him. So, ignoring his subtle protest, Mary turned to the waitstaff following her and told them to do whatever he tells them to do. Then she went back inside to try to calm people down, accidentally slamming the door really hard behind her. The waitstaff looked at Jesus, wondering what he was going to do. He thought for a moment, and then looked around and noticed clay cisterns used for the Jewish rites of purification lined up outside of the door. "See those jars?" he said to the waitstaff. They weren't Jewish, so they weren't bothered by him using them for an unintended, non-ritualistic purpose. "I want you to fill them up to the brim with water." So that is what they did, exactly as Jesus instructed, filling them right up to the brim. And then, without even an abracadabra, Jesus dipped a ladle into one of the jars and emptied it into a clean wine glass, which he just happened to have handy. To everyone's astonishment, the ladle emptied not water, but a dark red wine. He turned to the staff. "Please take this to the host for him to try, but don't tell him where it is from." So they did, and when they found the host, they handed him the glass for him to try. The host swirled the wine in the glass. "Nice legs," he said with a wink as he watched the way in which the wine ran down the inside of the glass, as if through veins. He raised it up for a sniff. "Oh, now this has an intriguing nose on it. I'm getting notes of woody elderberries and maybe Ghirardelli chocolate." Then he took a sip. "Ah, yes, an old vine Zin. Splendid! Oh, what is that? The slightest hint of what? Macaroni and cheese. I did not expect that. This is fantastic." Full of amazement, the host exclaimed, Normally people put out their best wine first and save the rest for when people are already drunk. But at this wedding, the bridegroom saved the best wine for last. It is simply amazing." With that, the host served the wine, and everyone raved. The evening was special by any standards. The whole town came together, enjoying one another as never before, in fellowship and good cheer, all because Jesus showed up, doing what Jesus does, sharing the light, and making everything all right. As Western readers, we're so conditioned to read the Bible literally that we often miss the point of the stories. Because if we're really honest, we don't care whether Jesus can transform water into wine when we're living desperate lives of emptiness and loneliness rather than lives of love and fullness. Jesus lived 2,000 years ago, and I'm trying to make rent today and not get overwhelmed by a bleak future. So, and I think I speak for many people, please, please let the story be about more than just Jesus turning water into wine. In John chapter 1, the authors tell us that Jesus is the Word of God made flesh. God's light shines through Jesus. Further, while the law was given to Moses, truth and grace come through Jesus. See, for the Jews, justification comes through following the law of Moses and living by those rules. Atonement for those sins of failing to do so comes through sacrifices. That is how we make ourselves right with God. It is about control. If you follow the rules, you're good. If you don't, you're not. But it is up to you. You're in control. This story, however, tells us that the rules and the laws are not enough. Sure, they help us recognize the difference between good and bad, right and wrong, but they will never transform lives. Only the light of God's love in Jesus and in you can do that. God's love is the necessary ingredient for living an extraordinary life full of meaning and grace. And this is about letting go of control. You don't hold all the cards. You hand them over to God when you choose to live a life by love alone, through God's love alone. You have to have faith that things will be okay, that this will be enough. Because if you can do this, if you can let go, if you can live in the space of love, your life will be markedly better. It is a fundamental shift in understanding, the one necessary to discover the beauty of a life lived in and by love. It is 1978, and Brian enters a bowling alley for the first time. It is loud, crowded, and it smells like a cross between his older brother's gym socks and the ashtray in his mom's Pinto, and frozen pizza. It immediately feels like home. Staying close by his mother's side, the first smack of a ball hitting the pins startles him, but then he sees a couple classmates and runs over to greet them. They are all there for Melissa's sixth birthday party, the whole class. He didn't know at that moment that he was about to meet the love of his life, bowling. The funny shoes, the sound of the slick, oily ball warbling toward the pins, the crash of the impact, the laughter, all of it felt divine to him. If you've ever been bowling, you've probably seen those little fences that can be raised up to keep the ball out of the alleys. They use them for little kids to give them a chance of hitting at least a few of the pins. They were up for that party, and while young Brian demonstrated an aptitude for bowling on his first day, he appreciated having them there. After that initial exposure to bowling, Brian was always bugging his parents to take him back, so they would, happy that he was interested in a sport. Soon he became somewhat of a regular. He was even fine going by himself when his parents had other things to do. But each time he went, he would raise up the fences, just like that first time he went bowling. After a while, a few people started to notice this and thought it was weird. But Brian didn't care what other people thought. He loved bowling, and the fences made him feel comfortable. As he grew older, however, people started making comments about the fences, sometimes snickering and pointing. While he still loved bowling, he didn't like feeling like he was the butt of jokes. So he started going to the alley at odd hours to avoid being seen, where he could bowl with the fences up in peace. Since the bowling alley was open 24 hours a day, he started showing up at 4 a.m. This also worked well with school hours and later his college and work schedule. That is when he first met Joshua at 4 a.m. He was the bowling alley's proprietor. Joshua used to be a professional bowler long ago, winning enough money to buy this bowling alley. He now spent time running the alley and teaching classes, but in the wee morning hours he would bowl alone for the pure joy of it. He was a sight to behold, the way he controlled the ball as if by telepathy. For such a slight older man, he generated incredible power, leveling the pins with nearly every throw with such elegance and grace. It felt almost as if the pins were diving out of the way in deference to him. None of this was lost on Brian, who would often watch Joshua out of the corner of his eye, noting how quickly his score tallied up. For all his hours and hours of bowling, Brian had never scored above 185, which wasn't a bad score, but with all his practice, it seemed he should be so much better. The next morning, Brian, for the first time, selected the lane right next to Joshua's. He had never done this before, opting instead for one as far away as possible, at a lonely part of the deserted lanes, so as to avoid the snickers. As was his practice, the first thing Brian did when he got to the lane next to Joshua's was to raise up the fences. He watched Joshua to see if he noticed, but Joshua didn't say anything, didn't even seem to be paying attention. The two men bowled that way, alternating throws for a couple of games. Brian would power a heavy ball, carefully missing the fences with each throw and smashing the pins, but nearly always leaving a few pins standing. Joshua would gracefully level the pins, as if it required little to no effort. Finally, Brian turned to Joshua. The two men had never said more than hi to one another in all the years that Brian had been bowling there. "How do you do that? How do you so consistently throw strikes?" Brian asked. Joshua was kind but direct. "You have to put the fences down. The fences narrow the lane to the point that you can't get a proper curve on the ball to throw strikes with any regularity." Without asking, Joshua grabbed the tool to lower the fences and dropped them down. Brian felt exposed. After defending his use of fences for so long, he felt like the carpet was pulled out from beneath him in that moment. "Try it now," said Joshua. Bryant hesitated. "It will be okay," reassured Joshua. Mustering up the courage, Brian threw the ball, and then another, and then several more. Nothing changed, though. He was getting the same 7-10 splits as before, the outer pins left standing. "You're bowling as if the fences are still there," said Joshua. "It is a habit. You just have to unlearn it." "I want you to try something," said Joshua. "I want you to try curving the ball just enough to gently land it in the gutter." "You want me to throw gutter balls?" asked Brian. "Yes. I want you to ignore the pins and gently drop the ball into the gutter. Here, let me show you." Joshua picked up his ball and then proceeded to botch the perfect game that he was bowling up to that point, to lightly and gracefully drop the ball just over the edge and land it softly in the gutter. See? Bowl an entire game like that. So that is what Brian did. He bowled an entire game that way. By the end, he was actually getting pretty good at it. He was able to throw gutter balls with near perfection. Even though he had never bowled a particularly high-scoring game, he actually had pretty good control of the ball. Joshua watched, offering a few pointers here and there, but mostly he just let Brian figure it out. "Okay," said Joshua, "now I want you to do the same thing, but this time aiming for the pins, but taking the ball to the very edge of the lane with each throw. If you drop it into the gutter, don't worry about it." So that is what Brian did. Some balls landed in the gutter, but many didn't, and the ones that didn't were starting to land on the pins with surprising effectiveness. He was starting to throw strikes with regularity that he never had before. By the end of the bowling session, Brian had improved faster than at any other time of his life. He even scored a 223 in his last game, his highest score ever. Brian thanked Joshua for his time and advice, and went home feeling proud of his improvement. He really loved bowling. The next morning, Brian showed up at the bowling alley at the same time, but Joshua wasn't there. Brian looked all around, but nobody was there except the cashier. Brian selected a lane and then went to put his shoes on. He wasn't sure what to do. He learned so much the day before, but something didn't feel quite right. After thinking for a bit, he lifted the fences back up. He decided that he was going to see how close he could get to the fences, getting the maximum ball curvature without actually touching them. He immediately felt comfortable again. Old habits are hard to break. I think many of us approach our faith the same way. We want the rules. We don't want to make mistakes. We want even more stringent rules so we can't stray from the path. But in the process, we forget that loving is the most important thing. It is like throwing strikes in bowling, and the fences get in the way. I feel I have to follow the rules because they are God's rules, and if I don't, I'm a sinner. I'm disappointing God. So I stay in an abusive marriage because the Bible says divorce is bad, even if my staying enables that spouse to be their worst self, avoiding necessary change, because if I don't, I'm the sinner. So I am justified in oppression and villainization of people from other religions or people with different views on sexuality, because my way is the only way, and I could point to the Bible to show I'm right, because any other way is a sin. So I follow a broken and corrupt leader, because the Bible says that God ordained that person to be a leader. And if I don't follow, regardless of the evil that person is doing, I'm the sinner. Only Jesus says the rules won't get you to where you want to go. In fact, there is only one rule that matters, and it is a vague rule. Love. Love your God. Love your neighbor. Love yourself. And if you do that, everything else falls into place. The rules are like fences in bowling, designed to keep us out of the gutters, but ultimately they interfere with our ability to throw strikes or to love. But John 1 says these rules are from Moses, not God. Truth and grace, these are from Jesus. Listen to Jesus. These rules, if not kept in perspective, they can separate us from love. They can separate us from God. God's rule, God's commandment is simple, yet all encompassing love. To love fully and completely, we have to use the whole lane. We can't fear gutter balls. If the choice is between the rules and love, love. Focus on strikes, on loving completely, and let grace take care of the rest.